Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
If one wonders what the Third World War would look like, hey, we've just experienced it. It seems that the war of ideas has been won by the Islamists. We can't reverse this trend as individuals, but it must come from a collective strategy in which all Canadians speak out and make it happen. Although elections are just around the corner, despite what I have said, I fear that Canadians have not woken up and smelt the coffee to bring about any constructive change. It is sad, but I still have hope, and I pray that you do too. It hasn't been a conventional war, but the pandemic we've all been through was a war against liberal values. The losers in this war were mostly vulnerable seniors and youth. Seniors lost their lives and dropped like bricks with not much being done to protect them. Their families lamented, but their voices were subsumed by the political dogma. Students became isolated and attached to machines. What kind of a mindset does one expect from young people who had no outlet during the pandemic, so they veered towards their only entertainment, the internet? Ordinary citizens were brainwashed to obey commands without questioning, and those who did question were rudely silenced. Law enforcement were given powers beyond their capacity. While shootings have become a common occurrence on the streets of Toronto, their focus was running after unmasked citizens and harassing mothers and children in parks. The biggest casualty in this war was free speech, as those who questioned the status quo were arrested or silenced by cancel culture. In my perspective, amongst the winners in this war primarily were the Islamists. They are laughing all the way to the bank. Yes, there were no explosions or terror attacks, but the Islamists won. You may ask how, and I'll tell you. The Islamists made alliances with organizations on the far left like Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They cheered at the removal of Donald Trump, who called them out for who they are. Taliban are quickly taking over in Afghanistan after the withdrawal of US forces. Locally, the Islamists made most of the horrific tragedy in London, Ontario, where a Muslim family was killed. Imagine the shock of the grieving family when they heard Munir al-Qasim say,
"Whatever is happening in Jerusalem and Gaza is related to whatever happened in London, Ontario."
The Islamists love toppling of statues and burning of churches. All this happening while law enforcement is too busy catching anti-maskers and those who wish to worship in churches. Today, the Islamists have won because their Islamophobia hype has been validated by the government, and they're busy getting funding to implement various projects labeled anti-racist, but which are only an extension of Motion 103. The sad part is that the Islamists did not have to do any work or make an effort. Our leaders have done all the dirty work for them. When the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, says,
"The reality is our Canada is a place of racism,"
while he is a visible minority himself, it gives the Islamists more fuel for their anti-West agenda. This war has been won by the Islamists at every level of government. On a municipal level, we have the call to prayer being broadcast over a loudspeaker, and this, by the way, is even a contentious issue in Muslim countries. On a provincial level, we see permission given to a hateful event called Al-Quds Day Parade, which was instituted by Ayatollah Khomeini and is entirely a political game being played out on the streets of Toronto and other cities. On a federal level, we see selective protection of a particular community in the form of motions to prevent so-called Islamophobia, which is a word created after 9/11 by the Muslim Brotherhood. Yes, hate, bigotry, and xenophobia do exist. There is hate against Muslims, there is hate against blacks, against Asians, and the LGBTQ community. There is even hate against white people. The oldest, most extreme form of hate is against the Jewish community, where recent figures show it is at an all-time high. And we must fight all this hate through education and programs that help integrate communities. If you really want to understand hate, ask the Coptic Christians of Egypt. Ask the Muslim Ahmadiyya community of Pakistan. Ask the Uyghurs of China and the minorities living in Iran. It was after 9/11 I had said that this is not a war of weapons. It is a war of ideas. And if we want to preserve our liberal values of freedom of speech, equality, and human rights, we must have better and stronger ideas. But it seems that the war of ideas has been won by the Islamists. We can't reverse this trend as individuals, but it must come from a collective strategy in which all Canadians speak out and make it happen. Although elections are just around the corner, despite what I have said, I fear that Canadians have not woken up and smelt the coffee to bring about any constructive change. It is sad, but I still have hope, and I pray that you do too. This is Raheel Raza for Rebel News. Don't forget to click or like www.rebelnews.com.